Let me ask you something. Have you ever bent over backwards to please someone, only to feel empty, drained, and unseen in the end? You smiled when you wanted to scream. You agreed when everything in your gut screamed no. And yet, nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. Why? Because you were dealing with someone who didn't want connection. They wanted control. Today, I'm here to show you something that will shift the power back where it belongs. In your hands. Because the moment you stop being nice to a narcissist is the moment you take your life back. Let's be clear, kindness is strength, but being nice in the way we're taught to be, people, pleasing, self-sacrificing, approval-seeking, is submission disguised as virtue. And narcissists feed on that. They love when you're agreeable, when you don't question, when you sacrifice yourself to keep the peace. Because to a narcissist, your silence is permission. Your politeness is power handed over. But the second you stop doing that, oh, that's when everything shifts. Because narcissists hate one thing above all. They hate when you no longer need their validation. When you start showing up not to please, but to protect. When you shift from being nice to being clear, firm, grounded. You don't yell, you don't insult. You simply detach. You don't chase, you don't justify. You speak once, and you walk, and that drives them crazy. Because you've done the one thing they can't handle, you've reclaimed your sense of self. See, we're trained from a young age. Be nice, don't upset anyone, don't be too much. But in relationships with narcissists, that mindset is a trap. They'll exploit your empathy, twist your compassion, and make you feel guilty for even having boundaries. So what do you do instead? You recognize the difference between being nice and being strong. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for your truth. You stop shrinking so someone else can feel big. And most importantly, you stop betraying yourself in the name of keeping someone else comfortable. Because the moment you put you first, not in selfishness but in self-respect, you send a signal, I am not here to be controlled. I am not here to be drained. I am not your source of supply. And when that energy shifts, when your presence says, I know who I am, and I don't need your approval to breathe, that's when the narcissist loses all power over you. So let me leave you with this. Being nice isn't what heals your life. Truth does, clarity does, boundaries do. You were never meant to live in someone else's shadow, to play small so they could feel big. You were meant to rise, to lead, to walk in your worth, not beg for it. Stop being nice to people who weaponize your kindness. Start being real, fiercely, unapologetically, lovingly real. Because the world doesn't need a nicer version of you. It needs the authentic you. And that, my friend, is the version no narcissist can touch. Narcissists exploit people, pleasing, and niceness as weakness. They are masters at identifying those who are overly empathetic, who avoid conflict, and who have been conditioned to prioritize others' comfort over their own truth. To a narcissist, these traits aren't virtues. They are invitations. They see your desire to be liked as a lever they can pull, your reluctance to say no as a door left wide open. What you think is kindness, they interpret as submission. And the moment they sense that you're willing to sacrifice your own needs to avoid upsetting them, they pounce. They'll praise you for your kindness at first, encouraging your overgiving behavior. But over time, that praise turns into expectation. Suddenly, your acts of niceness are no longer appreciated. They are demanded. If you hesitate, you're selfish. If you express a boundary, you're too sensitive or crazy. And if you finally push back, they'll try to flip the script and make you feel like the problem. This is their game. This is how they keep control. Not by brute force, but by exploiting your inner drive to avoid disapproval. People, pleasing becomes a trap because it teaches you that your safety, your worth, and your peace are dependent on keeping someone else happy. But with a narcissist, that bar keeps moving. They thrive on creating confusion, keeping you off balance. One day, you're their angel, the next you're the villain, and you'll never quite understand why. That's because they're not looking for a partner or an equal. They're looking for supplies, someone to reflect their ego, someone to revolve around them. And niceness is the perfect disguise they use to keep you playing that role. The hardest truth is this: niceness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. Narcissists spot this instantly. They know the people who say yes when they mean no. They know the ones who won't walk away no matter how badly they're treated, and they use that loyalty as leverage. They twist your good intentions into chains. Real strength doesn't come from how much you can tolerate. It comes from how clearly you can see manipulation and choose not to engage. Narcissists hate when you stop being agreeable, not because you're being mean, but because you're no longer under their spell. Reclaiming your power starts with setting firm boundaries without guilt. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors that define what is allowed in your life and what isn't. When you've been conditioned to put others first or walk on eggshells, especially around toxic personalities like narcissists, the very idea of a boundary can feel selfish or aggressive. But in reality, boundaries are a declaration of self-respect. They say, "This is who I am, and this is how I expect to be treated." Narcissists despise boundaries because boundaries mean limits. Limits mean control is no longer one-sided, and control is what narcissists crave most. They want access to your emotions, your time, your energy whenever it suits them. When you start saying things like, "I'm not comfortable with that," or "I need time to think," or "No, that doesn't work for me," you break the pattern. You signal that you are no longer playing the role they assigned to you. The one who says yes, the one who never complains, the one who makes excuses for their bad behavior. But here's the crucial part. You must set those boundaries without guilt. Guilt is the emotion narcissists rely on to keep you compliant. The moment you establish a line, they'll try to make you feel bad about it. They'll accuse you of being difficult, selfish, ungrateful. They might even play the victim, turning the spotlight onto themselves to get you to back down. And if you're used to prioritizing peace over truth, this guilt can feel overwhelming. That's why reclaiming your power isn't just about speaking up. It's about standing firm even when someone tries to make you feel wrong for doing so. Power comes from clarity. It comes from knowing your values and refusing to abandon them just to maintain someone else's comfort. It comes from choosing authenticity over approval. When you set a boundary, you're not being cruel. You're honoring yourself. You're choosing growth over control, truth over manipulation, and self-worth over constant emotional compromise. Every time you enforce a boundary, you reinforce your own identity. You remind yourself that you are not here to be used, drained, or diminished. You're here to thrive, and no one, not even the most skilled manipulator, gets to interfere with that. Detachment and silence are more powerful than arguments. When dealing with a narcissist, most people instinctively try to reason, explain, or fight back in an effort to be understood. They pour out their emotions, hoping that logic or vulnerability will make the narcissist see their side or feel remorse. But this is exactly what a narcissist feeds on: your emotional energy. They don't engage in arguments to resolve anything. They argue to dominate, confuse, and drain you. They twist words, shift blame, and poke at your insecurities until you're exhausted, questioning your own reality. Detachment is the antidote to this cycle. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you no longer allow their chaos to pull you into emotional turmoil. It's the internal shift from needing their validation to recognizing that their approval is irrelevant. You stop explaining, stop defending, stop reacting. When you detach, you take back control, not just of the conversation, but of your peace, your focus, and your life. Silence is your shield. Narcissists expect a reaction. They bait you with insults, guilt, or emotional triggers because your reaction gives them a sense of power. But when you respond with silence, not the silent treatment rooted in passive aggression, but the kind of calm, grounded stillness that says, "You don't control me," it disrupts their pattern. They don't know how to handle that kind of power. Your silence becomes a mirror they can't manipulate, and in that reflection, their control begins to crumble. This doesn't mean you never speak up or advocate for yourself, but it means you choose your responses intentionally. You speak when it serves you, not when it feeds their need for control. Detachment is about emotional mastery, refusing to let someone else's dysfunction hijack your inner stability. And silence is the tool that protects your energy from being wasted on battles you can never win. The power in silence is that it gives you space to observe, to recognize manipulation, to choose your next step from clarity, not chaos. The narcissist wants to keep you in reaction mode, because as long as you're reacting, you're not thinking clearly. But when you detach, when you hold your peace instead of giving it away, you shift the dynamic entirely. You don't owe anyone over-explaining or constant justification. One of the most deeply ingrained habits in people who have been affected by narcissistic relationships is the compulsion to explain themselves over and over again. This usually stems from early conditioning where love, approval, or safety was tied to compliance, understanding, or people-pleasing. But the truth is, when someone repeatedly demands explanations for your boundaries, your decisions, or your feelings, they're not seeking clarity. They're seeking control. A narcissist will often question your motives, challenge your choices, or imply that your feelings are invalid just to keep you on the defensive. They'll act confused, hurt, or angry, not because they truly don't understand, but because they know that if they push hard enough, you'll explain. And while you're explaining, they're regaining control. This endless cycle keeps you focused on proving your worth and justifying your every move instead of simply living your truth. You don't owe a long speech for saying no. You don't have to justify a boundary with a 5-paragraph explanation. You don't have to defend your decisions, your needs, or your emotional reality to anyone, especially not to someone who's shown they don't respect them. When you step into your power, you learn to say what you mean, clearly, calmly, and once. If someone chooses not to respect that, their reaction is not your responsibility. Over-explaining is often driven by guilt or fear of being misunderstood, disliked, or rejected. But what if being misunderstood by someone who benefits from your silence is actually a sign you're doing something right? What if the discomfort of not explaining yourself is a doorway to greater self-respect? The more you practice stating your truth without apology, the stronger your internal foundation becomes. You start trusting yourself. You realize your value doesn't depend on whether someone else agrees with you. People who respect you won't need endless justification. They'll honor your words at face value, but narcissists aren't looking to understand. They're looking to dominate. Breaking free means accepting that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your inner world. You get to decide how much access others have to your energy, your time, and your voice. You don't need permission to be whole. You don't need to defend your right to peace. Self-respect threatens those who seek control over you. Narcissists depend on imbalance. They thrive when you feel uncertain, when your sense of worth is shaky, and when your decisions revolve around their moods and reactions. The moment you begin to operate from self-respect, when you stop seeking approval and start honoring your own values, they begin to lose their grip. That's because your self-respect means they can no longer manipulate you with guilt, shame, or fear. When someone who is used to controlling you sees you standing firm, calm, and grounded in your truth, it creates a crisis for them, not for you, for them. Why? Because your self-respect reflects everything they're trying to avoid facing within themselves. They can't own their own insecurities, so they project them onto others. But when you no longer accept that projection, when you refuse to absorb their blame, you break the pattern. You're no longer a mirror for their false power. You become a boundary they cannot cross. Self-respect changes how you speak, how you respond, and how you carry yourself. You stop over-apologizing. You stop tolerating emotional abuse. You no longer try to rescue someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. You start acting in alignment with what you know is true, even when it's uncomfortable. That shift is powerful because it's not loud or dramatic. It's steady, it's internal, and narcissists can sense it immediately. They may lash out, they may test your new boundaries, they may call you selfish, cold, or ungrateful. But that's only because your refusal to bow down threatens their illusion of superiority. Self-respect says, I am not here to be used. I am not here to serve your ego. I know who I am, and I know what I deserve. That kind of certainty terrifies those who rely on your confusion to control you. It's important to understand that self-respect is not about being combative or aggressive. It's about being aligned. It's choosing not to abandon yourself just to keep someone else happy. It's staying rooted in your values even when others try to shake them. And for someone who builds their identity around dominance and manipulation, nothing is more destabilizing than a person who refuses to hand over their dignity. Authenticity and clarity destroy the narcissist's illusion of dominance. Narcissists operate in the shadows of confusion and emotional manipulation. They twist facts, shift narratives, and keep their targets doubting themselves to maintain control. When you're unsure of your own voice, they can easily replace it with theirs. But when you begin to live with authenticity, when your words match your values and your actions align with your truth, that fog starts to lift, and narcissists can't thrive in clarity. Living authentically means you stop hiding parts of yourself to appease others. It means you speak your truth, even if it's inconvenient, even if it shakes the foundation of a relationship that's built on control. Narcissists count on your silence. They rely on your fear of conflict. But authenticity is louder than fear. It says, I choose truth over comfort. I choose freedom over illusion. That energy is unshakable, and it becomes impossible for a narcissist to manipulate someone who no longer doubts themselves. Clarity is equally powerful when you begin to see the dynamics clearly, when you no longer rationalize the mistreatment or minimize your own pain. You take away their ability to twist reality. Narcissists often play mind games, gaslighting, blame, shifting, playing the victim. But none of those tactics work when you're rooted in clarity. You stop questioning your intuition. You stop guessing your feelings. And that shift in perception is the beginning of liberation. Clarity also allows you to recognize patterns. You see how they provoke you, then claim you're too emotional. You notice how they create drama, then say you're the one who's unstable. But when you're clear, you don't react. You observe. You no longer get pulled into the chaos because you recognize it for what it is, manipulation, not truth. The more authentic and clear you become, the less accessible you are to emotional predators. You no longer feel the need to explain your boundaries or apologize for your growth. You see through the mask of charm or victimhood, and you trust yourself enough to walk away when respect isn't present. Narcissists lose power the moment you stop hiding who you are and start owning it fully. Because at their core, they fear what they can't control. And nothing is more uncontrollable than a person living in their truth.